In fractured times, art reminds us of the threads that tie us all together: myth and memory, struggle and resilience, beauty and survival. These forces converge in everyday rituals, in enduring beliefs, and in our search for meaning. What connects us across the distance of time, culture, and history? And how do those stories return to shape the ways in which we imagine the future? These are some of the questions we'll explore on Edge of Reason. A limited series podcast produced by Atlantic Rethink, the Atlantic's creative marketing studio, in partnership with Hauser Wirth, a home to visionary modern and contemporary artists. In this episode, we bring you a conversation between artist María Berrío and New York Times journalist Siddhartha Mitter, recorded live at Hauser Wirth 22nd Street in New York City. Berrío's exhibition, Soliloquy of the Wounded Earth, her debut solo show with Hauser Wirth, and her first in New York since 2017, presents new large-scale collages of watercolor and Japanese paper, where myth and memory intertwine with reflections on contemporary life. Let's join the conversation.
Hi, Maria.
Hi, Siddhartha.
How are you?
Good. Thank you so much.
Congratulations on these beautiful, beautiful pieces.
Thank you so much for being here, and thank you everyone for being here. And yeah, I'm really happy to talk to you.
We've been in conversation for a few years, and it's paralleled your work going through several different series, working in the same general modality, but there's been things happening, changing even in the way that you use your materials. And then also the works have gotten quite big. And along them are these beautiful titles that you give your series. What is it that you were feeling about the world or about our situation that made you think about a soliloquy of the wounded earth?
Yes, so Soliloquy of the Wounded Earth is the whole title of the exhibition, but it's also the title of this piece. And that was the first piece that I created for the exhibition. And of course, I was feeling an overwhelming feeling of how the world feels right now and how fragile and wounded it feels. So I started to work on this painting with the background, which was a little bit almost like an explosion of feelings and a very chaotic scene. And thinking about how, as artists, our job is to maybe try to make sense of the world that we're living in. And after I created the background, then she came through, and it was like this figure that she's somehow giving a sense of hope. And then I came out with the word of soliloquy, because soliloquy means kind of an internal monologue. And I feel like as artists, we are always living in an internal monologue. And then the wounded earth came with this thought of the fragility of how the world feels right now. So I think this piece kind of guided me through the whole exhibition. It gave me permission to continue, and it gave me this sense of hope. So yes, I was really glad that I got lucky that this happened, because usually it doesn't. Usually it takes longer to find a piece that you can relate to.
There was something that I noticed about this work, which I want to come around to. In some of your earlier work, the scenes that you stage or that you invite us into are rural scenes or village scenes, or like the coastal small town, which is reminiscent of Colombia. This is a very urban piece. It feels like a city. It feels like there's all this text on walls, fabric, surfaces. It's got a bit of urban kind of grime to it. The Wounded Earth isn't just an ecological concept, right? It's not just a concept of nature and the planet suffering. It goes to something else that I think you're showing here.
Yes, completely. I feel like, with collage, a collage is also like a material that is very fragmented. And I did feel this was more like city-like in terms of this feeling that I had of rebuilding something, of wanting to rebuild even physically. So I feel like this is kind of one of my first cityscapes in that sense, that it felt more like almost three-dimensional, like I wanted to build something out of paper. But yeah, this is one of the first cityscapes that I make. I usually, my work deals more with landscape, and there's also here some of the landscape in this other painting, or even behind the three fates.
You're very good at planting little clues and Easter eggs here and there in your paintings, which we're not even going to say what they all are because everybody can have their own experience of discovering them. But then here you've got some text, and you actually pointed out to me that you say it's too much to rebuild.
I find art making so fun, but I also find that it's so fun to leave these little symbols or messages in the work that people can discover and interpret however they want. So a lot of the works have like little messages. So when I'm making these works, I also entertain myself in a way of how can I make it fun and different.
The figures that you place in your works are always very, very interesting. For a long time, they were always sort of female identified or female marked figures. There's children a lot as well. And then there's always this wonderful effect that there's at least one, and maybe sometimes more, that are like really looking out of the frame and looking at us, right? There's a kind of a communication that you seem to like to establish in between this very dense scene, which then is rendered in a certain kind of flattened way with the method, and that's very involved and has a magic to it and has a lot of movement and flow to it. And then somebody, often a child, is like coming out and looking at us.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by the gaze. Like sometimes I work with the model, but a lot of times I like to work from my imagination, and a lot of these women come from my imagination. People say they look like my mother, or sometimes they say they look like me, or sometimes over time I find the same face comes back. But to me, the gaze is very important, and it's something almost like magical that just comes, and that kind of connects me to the picture. Like when I find a set of eyes that respond to me, I connect, and then I kind of want to know more about what I'm making. I want to dig and see what is the story, who are you, and all of these, like a closer relation to the figure.
You said magical, and of course, a question that always comes up, and it's overdetermined by the fact that you're from Colombia, is this question of magical realism, right? But you do stage these scenes that are just at the edge of the uncanny, where you can understand or form a story of what the characters are doing or what's happening around them, but there's just something is slipping a little bit away. But I wonder if you could speak a little bit about your relation, if not to magic, but maybe to the idea of enchantment as something that either inhabits the works or the scenes that you imagine, or that you're trying to grapple with in the works.
Yeah, I actually, right before making this show, I met with one of my mentors. Her name is Judy Glanzman, and she's an incredible painter. We were talking about this, and the way she describes it, which clearly inspired me forever. But she says that as artists, we spend all our lives inventing or perfecting a technique, and then we just construct these structures almost like made of bricks, and then just to let the light come through. So when she said that, it all made sense, in a sense that we spend hours and months and years creating these things, but then that magic or that thing that comes through is no longer related to us, it's something else.
Well, maybe this is a good moment to actually jump right into the making and what happens in the studio. I think if you've ever had the chance to visit Maria in the studio, there's typically a number of works that are all kind of happening at once that are at different stages of making. I guess, let me ask you, in working in your paper collage form with these Japanese papers, first of all, what were the challenges of moving up to the scale of these works? And maybe what were the new possibilities that that scale allowed in your relationship with the material?
Yes, I really enjoy making large-scale works. Like, I love that, you can almost see yourself physically. Mm-hmm. And working in a larger scale was very physical, but it was also a way of being a little bit more expressive. I feel like the smaller works are very intimate, and there is this sense where you can get lost in the details. But when you create the larger works, I feel like I was a little bit careless. I was more free. So I could find that sense of freedom of just taking something and then applying it in something that I would think it works. But because collage has very little rules, because it's not a tradition that has been for so many years. So there's also that sense of freedom, that nothing can go wrong.
I wonder if we can go back in the history a little bit to the moment when paper really became the core material for you, and then the moment when you really honed in on this Japanese paper, because there was a time you were experimenting with many different kinds of papers.
Yes, definitely. Like, I used to be fascinated with drawing, and drawing was kind of my first love. But I kind of find a similarity between drawing and collage, because a lot of times I'm almost drawing with the X-Acto knife. I have used many different kinds of paper, like from Mexico, from India, from Thailand, from America, but I fell in love with Japanese paper because they almost kind of like blend with each other. So, and also because there's so many different kinds of Japanese paper. So I've had the chance to discover, and I continue to discover more and more. So it becomes this material that I keep discovering over and over again.
Did you have a previous interest in Japanese art or craft or technique before this encounter with these papers, or did they kind of arrive and suddenly just blow your mind and reopen, just open up all these new possibilities?
Well, I have fallen in love with Japanese culture. So 2 of my best friends from school are Japanese. So I think that I found their culture very similar to my culture. And that kind of intrigued me to the whole world that is Japan.
In what ways? What were the similarities that you noticed?
I don't know, I feel like, or maybe it's Colombians, but there is like this level of care that both our cultures have, and the mannerism as well. Yeah, I was intrigued by Japan.
But then can you tell the story of how you found Mr. Maruyama?
Mr. Maruyama is my paper fabricator, who is an artist himself. And he's an incredible person, an artist. And I don't speak Japanese, and he didn't speak English. So it was basically, he would show me each sheet of paper, and I would say yes or no. I never said no. I thought it was very rude to say no. So I said, I always ended up like buying everything, even if I couldn't afford it.
Mr. Maruyama was like, I got a good one right here.
He was like, she's a good business. But so he has continued to be this amazing artist that I collaborate with. And now, as of lately, I had met him in person, which was a very beautiful encounter because it was almost like we know each other. Then he sends me all these beautiful papers, but he's an artist himself, so I never ask him to make anything. I always want him to to do his thing, and then I'll do my thing.
So it just arrives in the form of the paper sheet, right? So,
Yeah.
So some of the mark making that we see here actually is Mr. Maruyama, but it just arrives in the paper sheet.
Exactly.
And then you, like any, any dye or any print or any other quality of the paper.
Yeah.
But it's so interesting that you kind of worked with him remotely for so many years. Paper is so tactile. How did you form a kind of a feel for the paper through the screen?
I think I'm like a kid in a candy store. I just want all of it, Like I have tons of papers in the studio that I don't use. And it's even this fascination with paper that I want to collect it, that I want to look at it. So I think I'm a little bit of a paper collector.
So just to close the loop on this topic, when you actually met Mr. Maruyama in his shop, were there any surprises?
Yes, I expected him to, in the screen, he looked a little bit older, and he was younger, and he rides a motorcycle. and then we went out for lunch, and his daughter was his translator because she speaks English. And all through our conversations, he would say, I'm not going to tell you what he's saying. Because it's very inappropriate. And I loved it. I was like, that's the perfect person I would like to continue working with. And then now we did a film with the Hauser Wirth with him, and he was very excited about it, and is a very important person in my art practice.
But in a way, that kind of paradox, right, of this maker in his own right, who is kind of a motorcycle riding, cursing character, but who does this extraordinarily precise, technical, soft and beautiful work. That's also, I think it kind of speaks to some of the kind of care that you take, but also that you're exploring or revealing in some of the characters, the figures in your work.
Yes, I definitely, I take a lot in account the care that these papers are made with, and like even if it's not my own culture, I do feel that it's a tradition that should be honored. Of course, it should be honored, but I want to provide that sense of respect to the tradition of these paper makers who've worked on this tradition for over 1,000 years. So, yeah, it's an incredible tradition.
Yeah. But what's interesting is that Japan has become a source of material for you. There's some imagery, I think, that comes through. You're from Colombia. You don't necessarily go back very often, and you've been in New York, you've been in Brooklyn for a long time. I guess I'm wondering about how it feels like a lot of the Colombian references in your work actually come from memory, and then what you're exploring in these is just a lot of possibility and exchange, possibility in human relation.
Yes, I agree. Like Colombia has been, to me, like memories of childhood almost, and this place that kind of stayed almost frozen, these frozen memories, and they come into the work all the time. But by being in New York for so long and absorbing what New York is, the multicultural world that we live in an everyday basis, I feel that the work has become about the whole world, right? It has become like all the influence of what I see, but there's always this sense of Colombia in the work that comes through nature, but also through my own identity. And I think that lots of artists that have talked about this in New York, that we have come from other places and been away from home for so long, we start to find the sense of home in the work. So I always feel like when people ask me, and even now that I have children, like, where is your home? I always think my home is my work. And then because I live here, the work has become many different places. But there's, of course, Colombia always present.
There's one more topic that I'd like to bring to the surface, and it's the dance and the dancers, and the fact that there are works that are in which the figures are modeled from dancers. And since, I guess, the previous series, that was when you started working with them, right? You've worked with a choreographer, Andrea Miller, and some of her dancers, bringing the figure into the studio, which you hadn't really done before, right? And so I wonder if you could share a little bit about what motivated you to do that, and then what kind of composition you might form.
Yes, I collaborated with Andrea Miller, who is the choreographer of Galim, and we had a beautiful performance that we did in a studio, in which she brought her incredible group of dancers. And my idea was, I didn't have like a set of instructions or anything I wanted to get from the performance. I kind of wanted to bring them into my world. So I have collected costumes as well for many years. Some of them are from the opera, some of them are my own clothes. And I had a chance to dress them up and then for them to just start dancing. And it was a beautiful moment in the sense, because as artists, a lot of the times we're just alone in the studio, and having the energy of movement and dance and also another artist as well was very inspiring.
And dancing is also a kind of drawing, right? In 3 dimensions. Yeah. Did you photograph them, or how did you, just as a simple method, how do you?
I photographed them. I photographed them, and some of these are from photos, but then the backgrounds are all imaginary. And in my past body of work, I did create like scenes with them, with the masks, and with all these other elements that I included from the performance.
This element of performance, and we've talked in the past about ritual as well. Is it important for us to keep the sense of performing, of embodiment, being in space and actually acting in the world from our bodies in community with each other?
Yes, I thought like in the past body of work, when I was thinking about performance, I was thinking also about this idea that in our current world we've become mostly spectators, right? We kind of mask ourselves with this idea of who we are, and we watch ourselves in these screens. So I think that idea of performance and to bringing back these rituals that are almost being forgotten has come into the work a lot.
And another theme that runs through this work also is the thread, right? And the length of fabric, which of course there's a lot of mythical analogies involving that. And then the idea of the flag, the banner, and this wonderful figure in the far corner back there who's got this extraordinary, like ramified flag, banner, processional thing. And I mean, in the context of the rest of the work, I read that, and it's kind of positioned sort of at the end of the show, depending on how people rotate through it, as kind of somebody to follow, somebody to walk with.
Yes. When thinking about these 3 works, I was thinking about the 3 fates and thinking about this idea of destiny and of our own fate and how little control we have over it. So the myth of the 3 fates kind of inspired the whole body of work, in which I created kind of this parallel world in which humanity is trying to control their own destiny. And then each work has its own story, but the thread goes through the whole work almost like a dance. It turns into banners and into flags. And then the last piece of the exhibition is Song Lines, which is the one at the end. And she's kind of carrying this flag that has morphed into these other flags. And it, like, to me, like, I just created it not so long ago, so I'm still processing the painting, but to me, as most of these women in the exhibition, they are not warriors. Mm-hmm. They're regular, they're us. Mm-hmm. And and that last piece of the exhibition is almost, she's not conquering a land, she's just asking for dignity. So I think that those were the things that I have been thinking throughout making the exhibition, is like, who controls our fate, who controls our destiny, and how can we demand some sort of dignity? And when you look at the gaze of this woman, that's what they're asking for.
I'm Jeff Chang, and you've been listening to Edge of Reason. Join us next week as we sit down with Hauser Wirth artist Firale Baez and writer Edwidge Danticat to reflect on resistance, its legacies, its emotional toll, and its imaginative force. If you enjoyed what you've just heard, like and review us on Apple Podcasts and help spread the word about our series to other listeners like you.